I stumbled upon a harsh truth about my relationship. For the past 3 years, I had been with someone I thought I knew inside and out. We had been living together for nearly 2 years after the world was struck by the pandemic, both losing our jobs, seeking refuge in one another's company. The plan was simple: save money, survive the storm. And yet, my discovery shattered everything I thought was solid. Things had always been a little off with him. He had this need for control. At first, it was subtle, small requests that seemed reasonable. He wanted me to sever ties with all my male friends. The way he explained it, it was about protecting our relationship. Sure, I now realize how wrong that was, but at the time, I didn't question it. I thought he was just being protective. In fairness, he did the same with women, or at least, that's what I believed. He was always adamant about one thing: cheating. It was unforgivable in his eyes. He had sworn if anyone ever betrayed him, they would be cut out of his life without hesitation. And yet, here I was, with proof that shattered that very notion. Our relationship had weathered its storms, arguments, misunderstandings, tensions, but recently, I thought we were finally finding our rhythm again. That's why it threw me off so much when I noticed a shift. He had become guarded. His phone, always easily accessible, now seemed off limits. He'd shield it from view, hide it when I looked over his shoulder. Something inside me stirred with unease. Why was he suddenly acting like this? I didn't want to overthink it. I wasn't like him, always protective of my personal space. I believed in openness. We shared passwords to our devices without question. But my gut told me something was wrong. And so, one morning, when he was still sleeping, I did something I shouldn't have, something I regretted the moment I did it. I grabbed his phone from the nightstand. Just a quick look, I told myself. Just a peek at the last few messages, I promised. What I found left me breathless. He had been messaging a girl he'd met online. They had been talking every day, exchanging intimate photos. I couldn't breathe, couldn't process the storm of emotions crashing over me. How long had this been happening? I wasn't sure, but it felt like months, maybe longer. The signs had been there, the guarded behavior, the secrecy. But this was undeniable. I knew in that moment that there was no going back. My mind raced with the realization, I had to leave. I couldn't stay in a place of betrayal and dishonesty. But how? What should I do next? Confront him? I didn't want his lies or his pleas to stay, to make me believe it was my fault. I didn't need closure either. I just needed to escape. But there was one major issue I hadn't solved yet. The dog. My dog, really. I had adopted him when I moved in, with his consent, but it was clear I was the one who cared for him. I did everything: walks, meals, toys. He was the fun parent, the one who received the affection. Still, the dog loved him, and I wasn't sure if it was right to take him. Should I take him with me? Could I just leave him behind, knowing how much he meant to both of us? And then there was the other issue, the note. Should I leave a message? An explanation? Or just leave everything behind, without a trace? There were too many unknowns, too many emotions to sort through. But one thing was clear: I had to go. After reading countless comments from people who offered their support and perspectives, I felt a sense of clarity. It wasn't just about the relationship or the betrayal. It was about doing what was best for me. One comment in particular hit home. It was about the cat, my pet, the one I had been caring for. It didn't matter if he loved her, or if we had raised her together. What mattered was her well-being, her future, and I wasn't going to leave her in a situation where she wasn't cared for properly. So, I made a decision. I called my best friend, her boyfriend, and my parents to tell them everything. I didn't want any messages or anything in writing that could be used against me. No traces of my plans were to be left behind. The next 3 weeks were a blur, filled with secrecy and tension. I moved some of my things to my parents' place, pretending everything was normal. But inside, the clock was ticking. I couldn't stay any longer. Finally, the day came. My best friend, her boyfriend, and my dad arrived. We loaded up the truck, took everything I could carry, and left. In just 90 minutes, it was over. My things, the items I had paid for, everything was gone. The only thing I left behind was a queen-size bed I had bought after moving in. I even made sure to cancel the subscription for his game account, one he used my bank account for. I left a note on his desk, just a short message to make it clear, he hadn't been robbed, he hadn't lost everything. I had simply taken what was mine. I didn't tell him about the cheating. At that point, it was irrelevant. It had been the last straw in a string of disappointments. I blocked his number and left. But that wasn't the end. He reached out, tried to message me on WhatsApp, called several times. But I didn't care anymore. The days that followed were quiet. Until one day, he showed up at my workplace. Uninvited. Unannounced. I didn't want to cause a scene, so I stepped outside to take a break, leaving my colleagues unaware of the storm I had just weathered. I had just gotten back to work after the unexpected encounter with him. He had insisted we meet up, telling me he needed closure, that I owed him that after all these years. It was the kind of thing that was hard to ignore, even though deep down, I knew it would be a conversation full of empty words. I agreed to meet him at the park across the street. I knew he wouldn't just let me go without some kind of explanation. He had to speak his mind, to somehow try to salvage the wreckage he'd caused. The conversation dragged on. Mostly, he said things that had no real impact. But there were moments that stuck. For instance, he demanded his monitor back. He was willing to buy me a new one or even trade me his newer, better model. I just shrugged. I like my monitor. Too bad for him. Then, it got even more ridiculous. He went out, bought the exact model he thought he needed, set it up to play his game, only to realize I had taken his headset too. In a fit of frustration, he asked his mother to buy him a new one, but she only got him headphones without a mic. The audacity! He kept asking for the cat back, offering anything he could think of to get her. Money, his crypto savings, even 60,000 gold in his game, whatever it took. I almost laughed. Some things couldn't be bought, no matter how much you had. He even suggested we could co-parent the cat. When I rejected that, he asked to say goodbye to her, face to face. I said no. He had never even cleaned up after her, never once cared for her like I did. He wasn't even there for her, not in the ways that mattered. He mumbled that he could do it if he had to, but I wasn't buying it. He was just trying to hold on to her for selfish reasons. The whole thing was so baffling. He actually suggested we go grocery shopping together. We used to do that when we were together, but now, it seemed pathetic. He offered to have groceries delivered, but it was too much work, apparently. I told him to learn to adjust, to evolve. Then came the apologies, too many to count. He said how sorry he was for hurting me, but I wasn't hearing it. Hurt was too soft a word. I wasn't hurt. I was disgusted. I cringed every time I thought about the conversations I had read, the betrayal I had uncovered. When I told him that, he got offended, mumbling something about privacy. And yet, not once did he own up to what he had done. Never mentioned the affair. I brought up the side chick. I couldn't help myself. They had joked about meeting in the janitor's closet at her work, but I had to remind him of it. I wished them both the best, and made it clear that, as far as I was concerned, he could keep the bed. He wouldn't have to worry about the janitor's room anymore. It was the least I could do. He tried to salvage something from the wreckage by asking if we could be friends. I told him, time and again, that he had betrayed me and that I didn't want anything to do with him. I wasn't interested in pretending everything was fine. And yet, he couldn't understand how his dishonesty had destroyed any chance of friendship. He claimed he couldn't bring himself to tell me he wasn't committed to me anymore. I pointed out the hypocrisy, how he'd exploded on me for talking to male friends, yet he could cheat without a second thought the moment a semi-attractive woman came into his life. He justified it, of course, saying that when a woman cheats, it's the greatest sin, but when a man does it, it's not so bad. I could barely stomach it. For the rest of the conversation, he tried to act like we could just chat casually. But I wasn't interested in his life anymore. Not after everything. I reminded him that he was now a closed chapter to me. And when the silence finally fell, when the moment seemed to stretch on forever, we said our final goodbyes. At least, I hope they were final. I went back to work, feeling nothing but relief. In the week that followed, I felt like I had shed a heavy weight. There was lightness in my step, a sense of freedom I hadn't felt in years. I had time to focus on myself. I was reconnecting with people I hadn't spoken to in ages. I was starting to live my best life, and not once did I regret the decision. Sure, there had been good times, but the bad times were the ones I carried with me. It had been a valuable experience. A lesson learned. And, more importantly, I knew now what to look for in a partner, and what to never overlook again. A huge thank you to everyone who commented on my post. Your words were the push I needed. They helped me make what I hope is the right decision. Update 2. I wasn't sure whether to post this second update or not. But after everything that has happened in the last few days, I realized, why not? We all love a good dose of karma, don't we? It seemed like the universe had its way of catching up with him, and I wanted to share that with you all. A little background, though. I didn't share everything in the original post, mostly to keep things safe, to ensure X couldn't connect the dots. But now that it's all said and done, I think it's time. We were together for nearly 7 years, but there was so much more that I left out. I wrote the first post because I needed an unbiased opinion. I wanted to know if I should take the cat with me or not, even though, by the time I made that decision, the cheating had already sealed the fate of our relationship. The truth is, I had been thinking about leaving him for almost a year before I finally did it. Each time the abuse escalated, I would consider it, but it was always hard to pull the trigger. There were moments I still held on, moments where I believed things might get better. But they never did. I won't go into the specifics of the abuse right now, it might be too much for some of you, but it was real, and it was damaging. My last update had ended with my ex showing up at my work in August 2022, offering me pixel money for the cat. I had moved out of his place at the end of July, and I truly thought that was the end of it. I thought I'd never hear from him again. I was wrong, of course. Since that day, he's reached out about every 3 months on Discord, each time for something ridiculous, like how he's lost his best friend or asking for pictures of the cat. I never blocked him on there because I figured, in case something important came up, like if we needed to exchange forgotten items, I'd keep the line open. Then, in March, I found out by pure chance that he was still using my old League account. He'd been banned on 3 different accounts for toxicity, which I suppose was his pattern, but the real kicker? I had given him the password when we were together. I never thought he would have the audacity to keep using it after everything was over. All he had to do was ask, and I would have given him access to the account without any issue. Instead, he just kept playing, completely disregarding me. It irritated me, but I didn't act on it right away. For about a week, I debated, should I let it go or change the password? And then he messaged me again. This time, he wanted to ask me something. I reminded him, once again, that I had told him not to contact me. He said okay, but that didn't last long. 2 weeks later, there he was again, saying he was going to ask his question no matter what. I pointed out how he couldn't even respect one simple request, and yet here he was, disrespecting my boundaries again. Clearly, he'd learned nothing. He didn't care about boundaries, he never had. The question he asked me? What did it feel like to be with a complete monster for 7 years? Why did you stay for so long? Apparently, he was having some kind of epiphany. He went on with all these crocodile tears and dramatic explanations. The gist of it was, he had been reflecting on his life, realized he was a lunatic, and needed help. He apologized for how he had treated me. It was almost laughable. But what really hit me was when I found out he had spent all his savings, including the crypto he offered me for the cat, and even his disability money. It wasn't just his money he had blown through, he had no way to even consider buying my league account, the one he had been using for months. So, of course, he had no means to make good on his promises. And guess what? His little affair didn't work out. No surprise there. A few months earlier, a friend from my ex's side chick's country had messaged me. This friend knew my side of the story and, once he found out the side chick was coming to visit my ex in our country, he pieced things together. He wasn't expecting much from their relationship, especially after learning that the side chick had broken her previous boyfriend's heart just to move on to the next guy who gave her attention. When I mentioned to him how ironic it was that my ex would cry about me being 5 minutes late from work, but then get involved with a woman who treated cheating like a sport, he agreed. He said it was pretty ironic. He also said that my ex had to lie in the bed he made, which, honestly, was the most mature thing he had said in all of this. Oh, and did I mention that my ex was too dumb to link his own debit card to his World of Warcraft account? Yeah. That's why he couldn't play anymore. Not just that, but I'm sure he lost his sugar mommy who had been paying for everything, and failed to secure another one. As for me, Kitty and I are thriving. I've been staying active, and I've even lost 12 kilograms since the breakup. It was like the weight melted away as soon as I walked out the door. I'm getting back into shape, and my life is finally on track. I've reconnected with most of my friends, apologized for not being in touch these past few years, and they were incredibly understanding. Things are going back to how they were before. I've even met the most decent, kind, and compassionate man out there. So, yeah, life is looking pretty damn good. I just want to take a moment to thank everyone who supported me on Reddit. Your words really gave me the strength I needed to make what I believe was the right decision. Thanks for reading, and I hope you all have a great day.